For Libra, there are seasons in life when everything seems to slow down, not because you are becoming weaker, but because something deep inside you is shifting. What once felt familiar no longer holds the same voice. Choices that used to bring comfort no longer offer the peace they once did. As a Libra, you are deeply sensitive to imbalance, so you feel it clearly. When your soul no longer wants to live the old way, a subtle feeling begins to surface, both unfamiliar and strangely familiar, as if you are standing right at the threshold of yourself. This is not a loud moment. There are no dramatic signs, no confirmation from the outside world, just a very quiet call, soft, but strong enough to make you pause, strong enough to make you ask yourself, who am I, really, when I am no longer trying to please the world around me? And from that single moment of honesty, the story begins to unfold. Libra often doesn't realize the moment they begin to awaken, until they have already moved a little past it. Everything happens quietly. No noise, no major event, no announcement that a door has just opened. Just an ordinary morning when you wake up and suddenly notice you no longer feel as lost as before. Not exactly happiness, not quite peace either, but something different is present, a feeling subtle yet strong enough to make you pause, to slow your breathing, to listen to yourself just a little more closely. Inside you, a very gentle vibration begins to stir. You don't know where it comes from. You don't know why it's there. It feels as if someone is softly calling your name from a very deep place. Not to rush you, not to push you, just to remind you that you are still here. Many Libras grow used to listening to others, used to holding the balance, used to adjusting the space around them, so used to it that they forget what it feels like to truly listen to themselves. And then one day, the old questions are no longer enough. Questions about right and wrong, about should and should not, about how to keep everyone satisfied. They begin to feel exhausting. You start to realize you have been answering those questions for many years, and yet something still feels missing. Not a lack of achievement, not exactly a lack of love. What's missing lives somewhere else, deeper, quieter. It feels like you've played your role well. You've been proper, responsible, considerate, and still, you're not sure you've been living truthfully. This realization doesn't arrive with judgment. It comes like a very soft nod, just enough to let you be honest with yourself. A Libra's awakening often carries a lot of silence. You don't rush to talk about it. You don't feel the need to explain. In rare, quiet moments, you begin asking yourself where you are going and who you are doing it for. You notice that the things you once protected at all costs no longer feel as heavy. Praise and criticism, glances, unspoken expectations, they slowly lose their weight. Not because you stop caring, but because a new inner standard is quietly forming within you. Libra is born with deep sensitivity, and when awakening begins, you feel it with your whole body. Your breathing changes. Even your silence feels different. You no longer rush to fill empty spaces. You allow yourself to sit with your emotions even when you can't name them yet. And in that staying, a gentle truth begins to surface. You don't need to become someone else to be worthy. You don't need to strain yourself to keep everything balanced anymore. This awakening makes no promises. It doesn't say life will be easier. It simply opens a quiet knowing that you have the right to live closer to yourself. You can begin with small things, an honest choice, a clear no when needed, listening to your body instead of forcing it to endure. And from those small moments, a different rhythm slowly takes shape. slower, clearer, and far less self-betraying. If something inside you is gently stirring right now, let it be there. You don't need to understand it yet. You don't need to rush forward. Just recognize that this moment may be the moment. You are beginning to remember who you truly are. And as the story continues to unfold, Libra begins to notice something quietly unusual. What once kept you staying, what once made you hesitate, what once required you to shrink yourself, to fit the world around you, is slowly changing its shape. Not disappearing all at once, not collapsing in any dramatic way, just no longer standing as firmly as it used to. Relationships that once felt familiar begin to feel different. Not because anyone is deliberately changing, but because you are no longer standing in the same place you once did. Conversations that used to flow easily now feel heavy. Silences that once felt safe now carry a sense of distance. And in those moments, Libra begins to realize something important. Not every connection is built on truth. Some are built on habit. Some are held together by the fear of imbalance. You also begin to look back at beliefs you have carried for a long time. Beliefs about always being gentle, always giving in, always standing in the middle, softening every tension. Perhaps those beliefs once helped you survive, but now you begin to wonder whether that calm came at the cost of your own silence. This question carries no blame. It arrives quietly, like light entering a corner you never truly looked at before. The familiar roles you have played begin to reveal their true nature. The understanding one, the one who is always fine, the one who knows how to keep everything harmonious. Libra begins to feel tired of wearing those masks longer than necessary. Not because you no longer care about others, but because you are learning to care for yourself in a new way, a way that does not need noise, but is clear enough that you no longer turn away from your real emotions. This unraveling is not here to punish you. It is here to clarify which compromises come from love and which ones come from the fear of being left behind. Libra is naturally skilled at adapting, but this time, you no longer want to adapt. By making yourself smaller, you begin to understand that true balance is not when everyone else is satisfied. It is when you no longer betray yourself just to keep the peace. There may be moments when you feel disoriented, when the things that once defined you no longer stand in their old places, when you are unsure whether to stay or to move on. Yet it is in this uncertainty that a deeply human truth begins to surface. We do not grow by holding on to everything. We grow by having the courage to face what no longer fits. Libra begins to learn how to stand still inside the unknown, not rushing to fix, not rushing to judge right or wrong, just observing, just feeling. And through that process, you realize something quietly profound. What leaves does not take away what you feared it would. Instead, it leaves space. Space to breathe more deeply. Space to hear your inner voice more clearly. Space to recognize how much you were holding that never truly belonged to you. This unraveling does not ask you to cut ties or sever everything. It simply invites honesty. Honesty with your feelings. Honesty with your limits. Honesty with your need to live in alignment with your true nature. And when you allow that truth to be present, even just a little, you begin to feel lighter. Not because every problem is solved, but because you are no longer straining to maintain an image that no longer reflects who you truly are. Perhaps this is the moment Libra begins to see more clearly who you are and who you no longer need to be. And from that quiet clarity, a new layer of you begins to emerge. more honest, more free, and ready to move forward to the rhythm of your own life. And as the old layers slowly settle, Libra begins to touch something deeply familiar, something you haven't noticed in a long time. Not a new idea, not a goal to chase, but a feeling. The feeling of being yourself, whole, unedited, no longer adjusting to fit anyone else. As if a very deep memory is quietly opening. Not loudly, not suddenly, just clear enough for you to recognize that you have lived this way before. You begin to remember who you were, before learning how to please others, before overthinking every detail, before measuring every word, every emotion, to keep the world around you calm. Back then, you sensed life with a natural clarity. You knew when something felt right for you, without needing to explain it. You knew when to step back, and when to stand firm, not from fear, but from self-respect. Libra's soul memory does not arrive dramatically. It returns in very ordinary moments. The moment you choose silence, instead of over-explaining. The moment you no longer feel the need to prove that you are kind or fair. The moment you listen to your intuition and realize it was never gone. You are simply too busy to hear it. Your natural sensitivity begins to return softly. You still feel the emotions of others, but you no longer let them pull you away from yourself. You still see injustice, but you no longer carry it for the entire world. You begin to understand that true fairness is not about making everyone satisfied. It is about not harming yourself to keep others balanced. And in realizing that, your inner world grows quiet. Libra's natural light also begins to reappear. Not a light that needs to be displayed, not polished charm, but the quiet presence of someone who has stopped trying to be the most agreeable version of themselves. You begin to allow boundaries. You allow emotions that are not perfectly shaped. And strangely enough, it is in that imperfection that you become more relatable, more genuine than ever before. What matters most is this. You are not learning anything new here. You do not need another philosophy, another framework, another path entirely. Everything happening now feels like remembering how you once trusted your own feelings, remembering that you once knew what was enough, remembering that you once had the right to choose yourself without guilt. This soul memory does not rush you to change. It does not demand big actions. It simply invites you to move a little slower, to let each choice come from inner truth, not old reflexes. And as you begin to do that, even in the smallest ways, you feel a new kind of steadiness forming. Not steady because everything is secure, but steady because you are no longer leaving yourself behind. Libra carries a natural gift for connection and healing, but soul memory reminds you that you do not need to save anyone to be valuable. Your honest presence is already enough. When you live from your true nature, refined, fair, and deeply perceptive, you spread calm naturally, without effort. You may not yet have words for everything that is changing. You may still be learning who you are in this version of yourself. But if you listen long enough, you will notice something very simple. You never lost yourself. You only forgot. And right now, you are remembering. And as you begin to stay with yourself more often, Libra slowly notices a very gentle movement taking place around you. Not the kind of change that turns everything upside down, but something like the air in a room suddenly becoming easier to breathe. A door somewhere is beginning to open. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly opening enough to let a little light come through. You don't have to run toward it. You don't have to chase it. You only need to stand where you truly belong. And that door finds its way to you. When you dare to live in alignment with who you really are, life seems to respond in a very natural way. Not through big rewards right away, but through small signals. A conversation that arrives at the right moment. An idea that shows up when you weren't even searching. An opportunity that feels random, yet strangely aligned with the person you are becoming. Libra begins to sense that life is no longer working against you. Not because the world has suddenly changed, but because you are no longer walking forward, doubting yourself at every step. You may notice that the way you make decisions feels different now. You no longer choose out of fear of missing out. You no longer choose just to keep everyone satisfied. You begin choosing what feels lighter inside, even when you are not completely certain. And it is that honesty in your choices that starts opening new paths. Not paths that were carefully drawn for you, but paths that form, step by step, following the rhythm of your own life. For Libra, inner stability matters deeply. When this new door opens, you may not feel excited. You may not feel overwhelmed with joy. Instead, you feel steadier, as if you no longer have to constantly balance between what you want and what others expect from you. You begin to understand that true balance does not come from everything around you being fine, but from the inside of you, no longer being pulled in too many directions. Any material changes, if they come, arrive quietly as well. Perhaps a job that aligns more closely with your values. A steadier source of income, because you are no longer working against yourself. A calmer financial decision, because you no longer spend to fill emotional gaps. There are no promises here, only a very human truth. When you live closer to yourself, the way you exchange energy with the world naturally becomes healthier. What matters is this: you do not need to force anything. You do not need to become a better version of yourself just to deserve an opportunity. You do not need to move faster. You do not need to prove more. This door does not open for those who are straining. It opens when you allow yourself to be ready to slow down, ready to speak honestly about your feelings, ready to accept that you do not need to be perfect to live a meaningful life. Libra begins to realize that life does not always need to be a series of constant efforts. There are seasons when the most important thing is not doing more, but letting go of expectations that no longer fit, letting go of relationships that require you to shrink, letting go of the habit of postponing your real emotions. When you do that, space naturally appears, and in that space, new things finally have room to enter. This door does not ask you to walk through it immediately. It simply opens to remind you that you have a choice, that you are not as trapped as you once believed, that life is still listening to you in its own quiet way. And as you stand there, no longer trying to be someone else, simply present as your true self, you begin to feel a very deep sense of calm. Perhaps the most beautiful part of this moment is not what is coming next, but how you are standing right here, not rushing, not afraid, not forcing yourself to have all the answers. Just a Libra, learning to trust the rhythm of your own life. And sometimes that is all it takes for a new life to begin opening. And when that door has opened wide enough for you to see yourself more clearly, Libra begins to notice a change that is deep and quietly steady. You no longer crave recognition the way you once did, not because you have grown cold or distant, but because something else has taken root inside you. a place to stand, not found in other people's eyes, not in praise, not in approval, but in the simple feeling that you are living in alignment with yourself. In the past, you may have been incredibly skilled at reading the emotions of those around you. You knew when to speak, when to stay quiet, when to step back, to keep the peace. That was not wrong. It helped you connect. It helped you survive in spaces that required tact and grace. But over time, you began to sense the cost of always prioritizing outer balance over inner truth. You grew tired, not because others demanded too much, but because you had learned to demand that you always be okay. Now, a new kind of balance begins to form. No announcements, no declarations. You simply react less to familiar expectations. You no longer feel the need to explain every choice you make. You no longer feel compelled to prove that you are good, right, or fair. You begin to understand something important. True recognition does not come from the outside. It comes from being able to look at yourself honestly, without shame, without regret. This peace is not the feeling that everything is fine. It is the feeling that you can stay with what is not fine without losing yourself. You are no longer pulled back and forth by other people's emotions. When someone is disappointed, you do not immediately assume it is your fault. When someone does not understand you, you do not rush to reshape yourself to fit their comfort. You begin to allow difference to exist within you and between you and the world. Libra has always sought harmony, but now you understand that harmony does not mean everyone must be happy. True harmony is not sacrificing your truth to keep the surface calm. You choose honesty, even when your voice remains gentle. You choose alignment, even when it leaves others unsure. And in those choices, you discover a deep kind of freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom of no longer betraying your own feelings. You may notice that some relationships change. When you stop seeking old forms of approval, some people stay, others quietly drift away. This does not have to hurt. It simply reflects that you are entering a different stage of your inner life. When you no longer live to be accepted, connections rooted in truth become easier to recognize. Fewer, but deeper. This new steadiness does not make you closed off. If anything, it allows you to show up more honestly. You listen without losing yourself. You give without needing credit. You stay present with others without straining to be worthy. And in that presence, you create a quiet sense of safety, not because you are trying to heal anyone, but because you have stopped hurting yourself. When Libra chooses truth, even the smallest truth, in an ordinary moment, you are choosing freedom. Freedom from old roles. Freedom from the need to be seen in a certain way. Freedom to live at your own pace. Slower if needed. Quieter if you choose. And in that freedom, you do not lose your natural grace. You simply use it to care for yourself first. You may not recognize this moment as it happens, but when you look back, you will see that you are no longer the same. Less rushed, less tense about being right, no longer waiting for someone to confirm that you are on the right path. And sometimes that knowing alone is enough to keep moving forward, lighter, more honest, and far more free. And when you no longer need old forms of recognition to stay standing, something very quiet begins to reveal itself to Libra. The new life you once believed belonged to a distant future turns out not to be so far away after all. It is not waiting for you to become a more perfect version of yourself. It does not ask you to achieve anything more. It begins the moment you accept who you truly are, without fixing, without hiding, without postponing yourself any longer. This new life does not arrive as a promise. It does not say that everything will now be easy. It simply brings a clear inner sense that you are moving in the right direction. When you remember who you are, you no longer search for yourself outside. You no longer chase borrowed ideals. You no longer compare your path to anyone else's. You begin living from the inside out, and that alone changes the way you walk through life. This remembering is not nostalgia. It does not pull you backward. Instead, it brings you fully into the present, a place where you can look at yourself without avoidance. You remember what enough feels like. You remember that you once had the right to choose peace over competition. You remember that your value was never measured by how much you did for others, but by how honestly you showed up for yourself. When Libra allows this remembering to happen, you naturally open yourself to what truly fits, not through wanting, but through readiness. Love, if it comes, arrives in a healthier form. No more clinging, no more rescue roles, just two people, walking side by side, respecting boundaries, honoring truth. You do not need love to complete yourself. You step into love when you already feel whole inside. This sense of fullness is not limited to emotion. It shows up in how you meet the material world. You make more grounded decisions, more conscious choices, no longer driven by fear of lack or the urge to prove yourself. When you stop running from yourself, the flow of life begins to move more smoothly, not always abundant, but steady enough to feel safe, enough that you no longer trade peace for temporary security. This new life does not require you to change the entire world around you. It only asks you to change your relationship with yourself. When you treat yourself with respect, the world begins to reflect that in very human ways. More aligned opportunities appear. Unhealthy connections quietly fall away. What remains may be fewer, but it carries depth and real value. Libra has always longed to live beautifully, to live in harmony. This new life does not take that away. It simply returns to you the right to live beautifully with yourself first. When you remember who you are no longer afraid of being misunderstood. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself endlessly. You move more slowly, but with greater steadiness. And with every step, you are living a meaningful journey. Not because it is perfect, but because it is real. You may not name this moment as a great beginning. There is no applause, no clear milestone. But if you grow quiet enough, you will notice that you are different. You are no longer waiting for life to start someday. You are living now, with awareness, with compassion for yourself, with a calm courage that refuses to turn away from inner truth. And perhaps that is the most beautiful part of this new life. It does not come from becoming someone else. It comes from the moment you remember who you are and allow yourself to live fully as that person. From here, the journey does not need to rush. It only needs to be real, and that alone is enough to carry your life into an entirely new chapter